We're just finishing up the last blessing of supplication on a personal level, the bracha of Shema Kolenu. God should listen to our voices. He should have mercy upon us. And it's interesting, this particular blessing, we find the word mercy mentioned multiple times. Shema Kolenu Hashem Elokeinu. So we discussed that. We don't say Shema Tfiloseinu, listen to our supplication, listen to our voices. Hashem Elokeinu. We refer to God as the omnipotent, almighty, which we have this personal relationship with. Chus v'rachim aleinu. Two expressions of mercy. You should have mercy upon us. We're asking God for mercy. Without mercy, there's not what to talk about. Because everyone has, unfortunately, a checkered record, every one of us, especially as King Solomon says in Koheles, Ein tzaddik b'ortza she'as tov v'lo yechta. There's no perfect tzaddik. Or a lot less than the perfect tzaddik. Less than perfect tzaddik. So we're asking God to listen to our voices. Have great levels of mercy upon us. The kabel berachmim uvrotzen es tfiloseinu. And again, and you should receive with mercy. First way is for mercy, great levels of mercy. He should listen to our voices and he should have mercy upon us. You should receive our supplications with mercy and with willingness. Because you are the God, the powerful one, who listens to supplications and tachnunim, beseechings. And from before you, our King, meaning we're coming as subjects where our value is purely to serve you, because we're referring to God as our King. Rekam al shivenu. Don't respond to us with empty-handedness. Don't let us leave empty-handed. So we asked multiple times, listen to our voices with great mercy. Receive our supplications with mercy and with willingness. Because you are that powerful one who listens to supplications and beseechings. And therefore, from before you, our King, don't allow us to leave empty-handed. Now, again, how do we close? Because you listen to the supplications of your people, Israel. Berachmim, again, berachmim. Without rachmim, there's nothing to talk about. Without the attribute of mercy. So what are we asking? We're asking God have mercy on us. It's like a person, God forbid, before a verdict is given, guilty, and it's just a question of sentencing, the defendant pleads for mercy. We're judged continuously. Our predicament continuously wavers. We don't know exactly where we stand. We're always asking for mercy. Without mercy, you cannot survive. We mentioned that when God created the world, he originally intention was to create it with the attribute of justice. But because he saw the world cannot survive with that level of exactness, he coalesced into it the attribute of mercy. But we know the various levels of mercy. And once said over in the name of the Dubna Magid, who was a student of the Vilna Gaon, we're going to read at the end of the book of Vayikra we read the Tochacha, B'chokosai. These are the curses. God forbid if the Jews, they deviate and they abandoned their Torah observance, God forbid, God will unleash a level of suffering not to be imagined. That's what it's all about. And it's read because it's something so painful to listen to. It's read in an undertone to indicate the solemnness and the seriousness of it. However, there's one verse which is read out loud, not in an undertone, and it's part of the Tochacha, part of the curses. V'sacharti loch es brisi Yaakov. I will remember the covenant of Yaakov, and I will remember the covenant of Yitzchak, and I will remember the covenant of Avram. And then again, the Torah reader goes into an undertone. So they asked the Dubna Magid, the Magid of Dubnow, why is everything read? And we're still in the midst of the Tochacha. Why is that verse particularly read out loud in an audible, very audible level? So he explained it with an allegory, as he explained everything with an allegory. He said, what is it analogous to? You have the son of a rabbi and the son of a tailor, and the partners in crime, and they plan a bank heist. And they're caught. So they realize they have a serious problem in terms of what level of conviction, what level of punishment will they receive. And they hear they're going before a judge who is very, very exacting and doesn't give you an inch, not an inch. And they both come before the court, and the judge, after reviewing the case, hearing all the evidence, he says, the son of the tailor will receive 500 hours of community work. 500 hours. So the son of the rabbi had a sigh of relief. He thought he'd get 25 years in prison, and he's giving 500 hours of community service. He sees this hope. The rabbi's son comes with a level of hope. The son of the rabbi gets 25 years of hard labor. So he's like taken aback. And his defense attorney immediately says to the judge, both of them admit they planned this together from the very beginning till the end. And they were both caught red-handed. Why does the rabbi's son deserve greater level of punishment than the tailor's son? He says, I'm going to explain it to you. The tailor's son, who is his role model? His father, a tailor, an ignorant, simple person. His understanding of the value of integrity and honesty and what it means to transgress and commit a crime. He doesn't really appreciate what that means, how serious that is. But the son of a rabbi, where he was weaned on his mother's milk, understanding all this, fully being adept in this, how does he behave this way? It's unforgivable. He doesn't deserve mercy. So the Dubna Magid explains the world, idolatry, murder, adultery, incest, everything, perversions. God lets them get away with it. I mean, someday there'll be a day of reckoning, but they succeed and they thrive and they go on with their lives. The Jews, we deviate for a moment and we're off slightly off course. We get twanged. It seems to be a double standard. So therefore the Torah writes, V'zochartloch es brisi Yaakov. You Jews, who do you come from? I will remember never forget the covenant with Yaakov. Jacob, the most special of the patriarchs. That's who you descend from. That's your forefather. That's your antecedent. And Yitzchak, what role model was he for you? the unblemished offering. And Avram, he was willing to die for God, go into the kiln. So who are you? Who are they? How do you behave this way? Therefore, I throw the book at you. You will be punished to a point where the pain will be so overwhelming, you'll be forced to come back and to get back on track. So the Jew, the evaluation of the Jew was different than the value of the non-Jew. A total different evaluation. Because God is dealing with a different reality of a person. As a result of that, we need rachmim like nobody needs rachmim. We need mercy. Because, as they say, the deck is stacked against us. But still, there is an attribute of mercy. Even within that context, there is mercy. It took 410 years before he destroyed the first temple. And it started many, many years before it was destroyed. The Jews went off the cliff. Idolatry, adultery, murder, many things. Second temple, unwarranted hate. God tolerated for 420 years. 300 high priests, more than that, during this time period. It's unheard of. Just to tell you exactly where we were at, the crimson cloth didn't turn white all the years after the passing of Shimon HaTzadik was the high priest. So God was speaking loud and clear. You people are in the danger zone. Did we even pay attention to the message? We said, crimson, that's such a terrible color. Yeah, maybe if you're colorblind. But if you see it, that red color, and you understand what being in the red means, it's something very serious. But we didn't pay attention. That the Jew supplicates God and asks for mercy, it's something very positive. Because we understand that you can't change in a moment. You can't, it's not possible. Growth is a lifetime investment. And we always we slip back, we regress. And we try to appreciate why we fail to be able to advance again. Although we straddle both sides of the fence continuously. We have remorse, then we're back. We have a hand in the till again. Then we realize we did the wrong thing. For a moment, you have remorse, then you're back again. That's just the reality of what's going on. But we understand. But that we ask for mercy, we ask for forgiveness, and we want God to listen with that merciful ear. In God's eyes, this is something very positive. We recognize who we are. And the more we appreciate our unworthiness, the greater is the value of that. So therefore, we continually ask for mercy. Without mercy, there's not what to talk about. Asking for mercy, we're saying to God, we're not worthy. It's only because of your mercy, there's a chance for you to be attentive and be receptive to our supplications, our beseechings. And we conclude, because that's who you are. That's very interesting, as I mentioned. The power of speech, why was man endowed with the power of speech? As the Torah tells us, he infused through his nostrils a soul of life. And the Aramaic translation explains and says, Vayhidel nefesh chayo. He became a living species. That's literally what it means. Nefesh chaya, a living species. But the Targum, the Aramaic translation says, he became a speaking species. The power of speech in the human being emanates from his soul. And any other living creature has no soul. It has a life source, no soul. So speech is an expression to express and actualize the potential of the soul. What was initially meant to be the actualization of the soul? The study of Torah and prayer. Torah and tefillah. As we said, the non-Jew initially was meant to be the chosen people as the Jews were the chosen people. Because all mankind was meant to be Adam, the person who could advance, spiritually speaking. Because Adam ate of the tree of knowledge, he forfeited that potential. Avraham Avinu, being the founding patriarch who espoused God's presence and God's omnipotence in a world that was devoid of his presence, there was a vacuum, he merited to be the one who was reinstated and chosen to be the Adam. He and his progeny could advance, spiritually speaking. But initially, when God created the world for the sake of Torah, the sake of the Jewish people, it was created with the attribute of mercy, as we said. It's Hashem Elokim. God initially said the purpose of existence cannot be met. That objective can't even be considered without the attribute of mercy. So the kolenu, the kol, which is Torah and mitzvahs, Torah and tefillah, is only within the context of mercy. Without mercy, the chance. So we're saying and we're concluding and we identify who is God. He is attentive to the prayer, the supplications of his people Israel, Berachmim, because that was the original intent of creation, that everything is Berachmim. Without Rachmim, the world can't exist. Baruch atah Hashem. God, you being the source of all blessing, we always acknowledge that. Everything is God. We're not blessing God, as we said many times. Baruch atah Hashem. You, God, the omnipotent one, is the source of all blessing. And you are the one who shomei tefillah. You continuously, in the present, you listen to our supplications. You know, there's a concept which is cited in halacha, in law, that a person should, whenever he prays the Amidah, he should always pray in the same location. In Hebrew, it's called mokum kavua. You should have your set place in the synagogue. We always pray. Always. If you pray at home, because you're not able to go to the study hall to pray or to the synagogue to pray, it should always be the same location in your home where you pray. If, let's say, you pray in your office, because you're not able to go to a synagogue to pray, it should always be in the same location. It's called mokum kavua. You should always pray in the same location. Where do we learn this from? Where is it derived from? Because we find initially when Avram was informed that Sodom and Amorah would be destroyed, it would be destroyed with cosmic level of destruction, he entered into a dialogue with God. And he beseeched God, he prayed for them for mercy. And he said, if it be 50 devoutly righteous people, would you destroy the cities of Sodom and Amorah? If they're 45 to 40, and he kept going down till there were not even 10 tzaddikim. There were no tzaddikim, no devoutly righteous. And after God responded to Avram, he walked away. The next day, it says, Avram went back to that location, the same location which he prayed. So from there, the Talmud derives this concept that Avram prayed always in that same location, went to pray in that same location. You should have a mokum kavua. You should always have the same location you pray. And the Gemara tells us, a person is kovea mokum l'tfiloso. A person always is careful, always to pray in the same location. When he passes away, they're going to say about him, this person was chosid, he was devoutly righteous, v'onov, and he's humble. You're humble, mitalmidov shel Avram Avinu. He's a disciple of Avram because he behaved like Avram. This is the person who always says the Amid in the same location. When he pent, they would say, Hi Chosid, he's a Chosid, Onov, from the disciples of Avraham. So the question is, to save the disciples of Avraham, we understand, because he is behaving as Avraham. What does it have to do with humility? They will say, and he is humble, because you always pray in the same location. Why does that indicate humility? Why? So there's a commentary which was authored by the Dodi Yehuda, Rabbi Cheskel Landau, who lived in the 18th century. He was the chief rabbi of Prague. He writes and explains that if you utilize something for something of sanctity, it takes on a holy status. For instance, if you take a bag and you store your tefillin in that bag, and you designate that bag to be the location for your tefillin, the bag assumes the status of your tefillin, and the material becomes holy. And when it becomes worn out, you can't just discard it, because it assumed the status of the tefillin. It has to be buried. As the tefillin have to be buried, or just put it in a location which is respectful, the bag has to be put in that respectful location. So whenever you use something for an action or an activity which is of worship, doing God's will, it assumes a status of holiness. So if a person prays in the same location, day in, day out, the location you pray, what happens to that location? It assumes a status of holiness, because you designated that location as the location of your prayer. Therefore, he says, a person is always careful, always to pray in the same location. Why is that an expression of humility? Because the person is saying to God, as well as I pray, as focused as I might be, I'm not really sufficiently worthy that you didn't pay attention to me. I need the sanctity of the location to assist me to put my supplication at a level that it's worthwhile even listening to, because I can't do it on my own. I need that extra assistance of the holiness of the location, because at least I prayed in that location. So a person who always chooses to pray in the same location, it's the expression of humility, because the person is saying, I can't do it on my own. I need assistance. That's how the Dodi Yehuda, Rabbi Cheskel Landau, explains it. So we say to God, we're far from perfect. We're unworthy to even be pay attention to. We supplicate you only with mercy, with mercy, with mercy. Without mercy, we stand no chance. We recognize our level of unworthiness. That we express it in such a context, that expression is an expression of humility. Because we're admitting and we're openly saying, why do we sin? Why does a person sin? What is even, without saying a person sins inadvertently? Ignorance. Ignorance is bliss. But it's wrong, and somehow you rationalize, and we cross the line many times. Why? Because you know what? We think to ourselves, we're entitled. No, God, you gave us a life. I'm happy to give part of my life for you, but I'm also entitled to something. So it's a sense of entitlement. I feel I have the right. When you stand before the judge, you say, Judge, I admit, I recognize I'm unworthy, because that level of entitlement, I'm not entitled. Therefore, I come with my hat in my hand, supplicating you only with mercy. Without mercy, I don't stand a chance. I'm not even worthy that you should even look at me and to have the audience. Therefore, continuously, wherever we supplicate Hashem and we make the request, it's mercy, 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 without unceasing mercy. So that admission itself is an expression of humility. Just to give you an application of this concept, that something which is utilized for something of holiness, it assumes that level of holiness, the equivalent of the tefillin bag, because you store your tefillin there and you choose it to be the location, so the material assumes the identical status, holiness as the tefillin. The Chofetz Chaim writes on Rabbi Akiva Eger. Rabbi Akiva Eger, from the time of the Vilna Gaon until Rabbi Akiva Eger, there was no sage as great as him. And he was a very holy man. He was leading to sage at the end of the 18th century, the beginning of the 19th century. Rabbi Akiva Eger, he was the father of the Chassam Sofer. And when his yarmulke, they used to call it a yarmulke, not a kippah. When his yarmulke wore out, you know what they did with his head covering? They put it in the geniza. They put it into shemus. Why? Because his mind never entertained or considered any secular thought. His mind was fully invested in Torah. As a result of that, his head covering was the equivalent of what? Of the mantle of a Sefer Torah. Therefore, that material is no different than the mantle of a Sefer Torah, which assumes the identical status of Sefer Torah. It has to be put in the geniza. It can't be discarded for that reason. Tell you there's a responsa. Moshe Feinstein, Zecher Tzarech Levrocha, passed away about maybe 35 years ago. He was the leading decider of the generation. He wrote thousands and thousands of responses. And any response he ever wrote, he never retracted. And it wasn't due to his, God forbid, his arrogance, or he felt he was so pompous that he can't make a mistake. He merited a special divine level of clarity that he didn't make a mistake. And every one of his rulings were accurate and consistent. And therefore, he was special. He was leading the size of a generation. So he once gave a ruling which was so profound and monumental, it shook the world. What was that? It had to do with artificial insemination. Inseminating a married woman with another man's semen, would that be the equivalent of adultery? Or the child, although it's being conceived from another man, but since there wasn't the act of cohabitation, the child is a legitimate child. That child that was born from that conception is legitimate. That was his ruling. It shook the world. Moshe Feinstein would not back down. Other people, great people, disagreed. He would not back down because he felt it was a correct ruling. So the Satmar Rav, who was also a colleague of Rabbi Feinstein, was also a leading Torah sage, disagreed. And his Hasidim of Satmar, the ones who were very learned, said, we're going to go speak to Moshe Feinstein and we're going to explain to him why he's wrong. So the Satmar Rav says to his followers, regardless how great you are in Torah knowledge, he says, I'm advising you not to go. Why? Because if you go speak to him, he will convince you that he's right. Don't think for a moment that he just gave a ruling just based on, it's just out of thin air. This is well-founded. I disagree because I see it differently. But for you people to engage with him, you're not at a level you could engage with him. And you can be proven wrong. Therefore, don't go. So there was a chassid in Israel who had written a scathing letter to Rabbi Feinstein, which was at a level of such disrespect. And he writes to Rabbi Feinstein, you think you're worthy to be a decider, to give halachic rulings for the Jewish people? You're not worthy. You're not a Torah mind. This is what he writes to Rabbi Feinstein. Rabbi Feinstein was world-renowned for his humility. World-renowned. He writes him back because he's being attacked based on his credibility as a decider. He writes him back. He says, I want to explain to you something. You say I am not a Torah mind. He says, in my life, A secular thought never passed through my mind. Never in my life. And he's writing this when he's a man, he's already in his late 60s, maybe early 70s. A secular thought never passed through my mind. My mind is permeated with Torah. No other thought. And you're telling me what a Torah mind is, what a Torah mind is not. That was his response. So if this is what God expects of Jews, and we're far from that, what level of mercy do we need when we stand in God's presence and ask God to respond to our supplications? Recognizing who we should be, who we're not. And despite that, we stand and we make requests. And we say to God, God, we're not where you expect us to be. Unfortunately, we wish we were, but we're not. Therefore, we supplicate you with mercy and mercy and mercy. Without mercy, there's nothing to talk about. The conversation doesn't begin. And that's why continuously, but everybody on his own level needs mercy. And without mercy, the world cannot continue.